We're kind of transitioning into chapter 7, which is titled Of Love and Limitations. But as John has pointed out to me, chapter 6 and chapter 7 really kind of belong together. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you, and maybe you could kind of bridge the chapters for us.
Well, from page 51, at the bottom, at the end of chapter 6, I wrote, to see the self in another person, not once, but over several months, and not only to see it, but to love it and be loved in return. This was, well, beyond words. But as I said last week, it produced this extraordinary surge of poetry, which was the best that I can really refer to in trying to convey to you how much it meant to me. I just picked out a few lines which I included in this book. No map can measure thee, nor man can know thyself divine. My God, the shadows flee. That radiance is beaming straight at me. And so it was. How can I wonder if I can sort of, if you can imagine looking deep into somebody's eyes, perhaps the deepest you ever looked into somebody's eyes, somebody you love, and then think of the sun up there in the sky, and somehow imagine a light halfway between the sun itself and those eyes. I wonder if that would give a sort of indication of what I was experiencing. It was way, way, way beyond what normal sight. It wasn't really, I don't think my physical eyes were recording it, or were they? I really don't know. No map can measure thee, nor man can know thyself divine. My God, the shadows flee. That radiance is beaming straight at me. And then a few lines further on, because of course she was a woman with a body. Who are you that I kneel before, my head upon your knee? Last night you filled the universe, and now you comfort me. How could that be? How could this woman's body, that I could lay my head on her knees, she could touch my head? How could that person be the one that filled the universe? Indeed it was. That's how it is. Do I use a word like divinization? What does that mean? What happened? Who are you that I kneel before, my head upon your knee? Last night you filled the universe, and now you comfort me. How do we cope with that? And then, beginning the next chapter, oh, miserable world, crushing love beneath your miserliness, under the pretext of helping or protecting, or believing some fearful reasonableness that prefers the familiar muddy duck pond to the uncharted ocean made for adventure. And so on. I might read you all of that poem. Anyway, just to try to convey to you the scale of what was working itself out in me, the contrast between the greatness, the completely mind-blowing wonder of such love that was both woman and contained and filled the universe, and miserable world, crushing love. Love taken carefully remains an infant, wounded by carelessness at every turn, wrapped in protection for its self-containing, wary of trouble for its own concern. How we protect love, how we wrap it up in, I always want to jib at that legal contract, bits of paper, that say you're married, and and all that goes with it, a ring on the finger, and all these sort of the structure of what we call a marriage. Of course, that to death us depart. It's a structure made for mortality, for this part of you. What about that? And now as this exploded into a superior reality, a super reality, you're in sort of tension, in conflict rather, with the world. The fear of losing the other, all the stuff that comes into it, jealousy and fear, and limiting it to the body. It's all so small. And who will accompany me beyond this harbour? Who will come voyaging the endless flea? Great-hearted woman at your moorings straining, rouse up your gypsy fire and burn them free. This girl used to wear gypsy rings on her ears. I think she had some gypsy blood in her. Anyway, I think it was that gypsy in her that both appealed to me and that attracted her to me, but it wasn't enough to make her break away from her marriage and come voyaging the endless sea with me. She did it a bit, but then she withdrew. Oh dear, I laugh about it now, but my dear, at the time it wasn't. It was so tragic, and yet it was, in a sense, it was compensated for by this wonderful spiritual, the thrill of the spiritual adventure. If there's one thing I've been all my life, it's an adventurer, and I usually sort of rise to the adventure. There's lots. This chapter 7 is nearly all poetry, because that's just how it came out. But just again to indicate what was boiling in me, I wrote this little thing: the non-life of life, the non-work of work, the non-marriage of marriage, the non-home of home, the non-importance of important things, the great non-event of embodiment in this world. That's how I saw things then. The last thing anybody should want is to be encased in this flesh. What on earth do we want to go into this prison for when the real life is free? Well, that's called salvation of the soul. Well, in this point, my soul was free, was saved. I wasn't in here at all. And yet the world was calling me back into this. I didn't want it. I saw that it was a non-life, non-marriage, non-hope, non-important, a non-event. This is the fall. This is the fall into what's called sin. It's not man's true home. It isn't this. Well, at this time, I was forcibly wrenched out of it, really, and then as time went on, I suppose, well, this is what spiritual work is. It's realization of this in contrast to this. It's coming to one's real home, to what's really important, the real marriage, the real work, the real life.
John, can I chime in really quick? On page 54, you write, as to a pivotal third point, I always come back to practice. Both despair and joy can give wings to prayer. And you and I, before we started the recording, just had a short conversation about the work, not John the man. And it kind of connects to what you write here. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that, the importance of the commitment to the work. I hate to use the word discipline, but I think discipline is a big part of it.
When I was learning to meditate at school in London, this phrase, the work, was used. And we were told to put it first. And that at that time, I suppose what it meant was the practice of meditation, which I was beginning to understand as turning towards God, in contrast to the world, because the two sort of polarities were already beginning to sink into me, that this was the non-world, this was the prison, as it were, and this was freedom, this was the real life, was in spirit. So I've, when I go to meditate every day, if there's anybody with me, I always say, oh, I must go to work, it's time to go to work. This is how I think of it, this is my work. Well, gradually, what is work? It's the practice of meditation, but what's the practice of meditation? What is meditation? Well, when you've been meditating as long as I have, you realize that the practice leads to the realization, and the ever fuller realization of spirit, that the spirit, which is I am, which is what I am. So in a way, the work is synonymous with spirit, which is truth, which is the unchanging truth. So you can use the word work at whatever level it's meaningful for you, practice or actually abiding in the presence, abiding in the truth, which is the one presence, the undivided presence, which during my good days, it seems to be more or less natural now for me. This becomes my fallen nature. That becomes my true nature. So that really is what is meant by the work.
You just touched on it, the non-life of life, the non-work of work, that part of the poem that you just read. I thought maybe you could, deeper is maybe the wrong word, but maybe you could give a little bit of a practical explanation of that, how someone could connect doing the practice of the work and how it connects to the non-life of life, for example.
When I was taught to meditate, much use was made of the phrase, let go. As I've often demonstrated, the whole essence of meditation is contained in this little gesture. Look, just look at my hand. Letting go is that. Now, let's say I'm holding on, say, to a pen, all right? I'm letting go of it. I'm holding on to it, aren't I? In the sense, I am forgetting the work, the real work, because I'm holding on to something. Now, when I let go, when I do, all right, let's come onto the screen. When I do that, go, falls out of my hand, doesn't it? Now, if instead of holding a pen, I hold on, for example, the non-important list. I'm holding on something that's important to me, right, in this world, about whether I'm going to buy some more toothpaste today, for example. I'm holding on to it. I'm like, this is what I've got to do. Next thing on the shopping list. I let go. And away it goes. Well, maybe it's a good thing to go and buy toothpaste, but let's say I'm holding on to some critical idea about the world. I mean, the world is in some sort of state, some sort of debatable state, right? There you go. See, what holds us down here? Think of a balloon. How does a balloon go up into the sky? It's there pulling at the ropes, isn't it? It's tied to the ground by weights. And what does the balloonist do? He gradually lets go the weights, doesn't he? He just unties the ropes. As he unties the ropes, he goes up. And that's exactly the process of meditation. He lets go. And so the consciousness rises naturally. Because consciousness isn't naturally encased in this mortal flesh. Consciousness is not mortal, it's immortal. So why is it trapped inside here? Well, when you let go, consciousness naturally rises to its natural home, which is, like an aeroplane going up into beyond the clouds. That's meditation. And that's why when we start to meditate and we realize that it's perfectly possible to let go of what we call life, the structures and ideas we have about life, our attachments to life, people think that if you let go, you're going to die. But when you meditate, lo and behold, you don't die at all. you discover a whole new reality. It's super. Wonderful. And then you realize you come back again to prison. And you've got to catch a bus or something. Put petrol in the car. Do your shopping. But up there, you don't have to catch a bus or anything. You're already there. So it gradually dawns on you that there are these two realities. There's what you can call real life, and non-life, or unreal life, or natural life and unnatural life, or immortal life and mortal life. This world and the heavenly world, spirit or flesh, you see. But it all takes a long time to sink in this, and anybody could read it in a book and sort of maybe think they know, but to actually realize it in your own experience, it takes time. And practice, at least in my experience. Unless you're lucky in this sort of explosion of realization that just comes out of the blue like it did on this occasion I'm talking about. But then the trouble is you sink back, you see, it doesn't last. Well, maybe like with a few people, some people say it does, but I think for most people, the forces of life just pull you back. And this is why you have to keep working, keep practicing all your life to gradually, as it were, establish yourself in higher consciousness.
That's very helpful, John. Thank you. So love and limitations, as you already mentioned, is a lot of poetry, but on the page 57, on the bottom, you write, many of our love problems arise because we do not love enough.
Ah, yes.
Beyond the limits of our so-called lives.
Yes, absolutely. I've often dwelt on that one, and in fact say it with some confidence now when anybody comes to me with love problems. Well, most people have love problems, don't they, to some extent, or other love experience. The answer to all our love problems is to love yet more, love ourselves out of them. See, within this confines of body, mind, and this, the infinite gets trapped within a rather small context. It's rather like trying to put the sky into a jam pot, You try to squeeze it in, but you can't really. And love really is of that dimension. It's infinite. You can't control it. You can't put it into a jam pot. At least if you do, you see, it'll have a temporal life, and it'll meet another person's jam pot, and the two will be happy for a while, but then the friction will start coming in, because it's love with limitation. Now, usually when we're young, we don't know any better, and we do the best we can. And then when we have our first quarrel, we're devastated by it. It's terrible. The pyramid we built up around love. I love you. I'm going to be faithful all the rest of my life. It can crack, and then I'm afraid all too often it begins to crumble. Why? Well, it's really because of these limitations we place upon it. Now, I don't say it's easy or even possible to straight away love on this scale. Who can, for God's sake? Who can? Being human means being confined into this. So we do the best we can. But if and when we have problems, and you come to someone like me to say, what can you do? I might get the answer. Try loving even more. I do remember once as a young man, I was must have been in my early 20s, 21 or 22. I was very much in love with a French girl at that time. And I was in Paris. I'd gone to Paris to see her, but I'd got used to the fact that this time that I wasn't the only man in her life. Anyway, I'd gone to Paris full of hope. And of course, she said, sorry, I'm with another man. Thank you very much. I was sitting all alone, really rather miserable, in a little cafe in Paris. And I suddenly, I don't know where, it was one of those strange things that just came into me. Love just expanded. I knew I could love her no matter how many different men she was with. I didn't have, well, of course I wanted to possess her. I wanted her for me, but the love I had for her just included whatever she did. Whatever she did, I knew I'd love her forever. And I do. That was 67, 68 years ago. No, more than that. Yes, I suppose a long time ago anyway. And it's extraordinary, isn't it? You quarrel with someone and then you go away and love expands, and you find you can love all the offense, all the horrid things that are said, all the other people in her life, the other lovers. Extraordinary, but it's what happens. So really, the answer to all our love problems is to expand love even greater. Greater and greater and greater. In one sense you lose, in one sense you may lose her. You lose the possession of her, but in another sense you gain an even greater love. Yes, ultimately, one loses a little bit to gain a greater. What does it mean, the love of God? When I first heard that, what on earth does it mean? But when you get to my age of life, it makes more sense. In fact, it's almost the only thing that does make sense. Yes, that's true.
I love what you said, John, that the love became greater beyond the body, beyond expectations, beyond how a person is showing up. Yeah. I'm jumping forward, but on page 60, where you kind of look back on what you had written, you write, at the time I described it at length, and when I read back over what I wrote, I'm still amazed. I suppose I was literally blown out of my mind in the sense of my usual identification with mind and body, yet visions pass and life goes on, and I could not stay in the new condition. So that says a lot, but can you explain a little bit about, if you had to put into words this new condition? I mean, you've talked about it throughout the chapters, but maybe for those of us that have not had an experience like yours, I think we would all like to have that experience.
There's a there's a current word, a current phrase floating around contemporary spiritual people: full self-realization, which I found actually rather offensive when I first heard it. I never really liked it as a term. I suppose probably that's pretty much what it was, really. I find it's really much easier when you're talking of these sort of great principles of spirit to describe them as what they are not rather than what they are. We cannot really describe them like we cannot really describe God. That's why, in reference to this body, mortality, that which dies, and this which is unreliable, to say the least, this fluctuating mind of ours, this new reality is that it's not confined, it's unconfined, it's not limited, it's unlimited, it's not mortal, it's immortal. It's not unreliable, it's reliable, it's unchanging. It isn't corruptible, it's incorruptible. Yes, we know what we are by coming out of what we're not. But we go even beyond knowing, even beyond description, because all description is necessarily limited. If I describe, if I describe myself, for example, in this sort of self, it's not you, is it? It's another person, somebody else. So it's duality. Whereas this is one, it's undivided, the one. God is one, spirit is one, freedom is not divided. Freedom is just freedom. And so, at its greatest, love is undivided. Love is total, is universal. Well, we cannot grasp it just like that. Maybe that's what this life is for, a long, long schooling in growing from the limited to the unlimited. You're taking that old song, "Don't Fence Me In," literally and seriously to heart and living it out. I think in a way that's what I've done. I think there's no better way of describing my life than that lifelong "don't fence me in" yearning. First of all, you look to the mountains and the deserts to find it, and then you gradually go inwards and find it in spirit. Look to the stars, go even beyond the stars. And it says, so long as we've got something to let go, you see, you can, I remember saying, well, what, how much do you let go? And you let go anything you can let go. When you've nothing left to let go of, well, there you are. No more limits. Everything you let go of, you see, is a limit, something that holds you in bondage. Slavery. This life is really slavery. We talk a lot about historical slavery, of moving people from different countries, and that's slavery. But of course, the real slavery is this. This is we make slaves of ourselves and of everybody else. In the same way that the real pollution, the only pollution really is this.
It's such a big step, John, to take ownership of that we are the problem.
Well, sinks in very gradually, dear. Or maybe that's why most merciful God gives us 80 years bumbling around in this world to get it into our thick heads. And the only problem in this world is me.
John, I have a little present for you.
Oh?
Yes, you get to listen.
While Cat Kelly was standing by the sheriff's side, and when that sheriff said, "I'm sending you to jail," while Cat raised his head and cried, "Oh, get me land, lots of land, and starry skies above. Don't fence me in, let me ride through the
wide open country that I know.
Don't fence me in, let me be by myself, leave me free. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees, and we all together, but I ask you please,
don't fence me in.
just turn me loose, and just straddle my old saddle underneath the western sky.
I love it. Dear Roy Rogers, his horse Trigger.